Democrat of the day. Go to 46B. Representative Cheryl Youakim is kind enough to join us to talk about the session that was, as well as also her upcoming campaign. Representative Youakim, thank you very much for the time.
Well, thank you for having me on. I don't know, though. It's hard to follow Chris Woolley.
Yeah, that was a nice get. And another thing which was really interesting, I just contacted him out of the blue and said, would you be willing to do the show? He said, sure. I'm like, oh, okay. It's like sometimes it's a little more complicated than that, but it was the only one that it was like just calling you up because one of the things I love about you, Representative, is as my representative, it's nice to have someone who clearly cares about their constituents and their people. And if I have a question, I can call you. If I see you in the street, I can ask you a question. You're very, very reachable, and you're very, very much there for the people of your district.
Well, thank you, Matt. I really do try to be, and that started way back being on city council in Hopkins, too. I think when you start out in an area where you're the closest to the people in a local elected, you kind of realize just how very important it is to be accessible.
Well, you just came through a pretty rough session there. I've talked this week. Melissa Hortman. We talked to as well Ron Latz. Let's talk to you a little bit about what happened here. As like I said, the Republicans' procedure, especially in the House, is to go to the most extreme stance they can, whittle off a little of the extremist point of view, and act like that's compromise. They really didn't get a lot done because they basically were driving an agenda that was Kurt Dowd's.
I like the analogy you used yesterday. And when a lot of these bills came off the House floor, they were actually as individual omnibus bills, and then they kind of grouped them together on the House floor. Like we had transportation and HHS in one bill. It's very odd. But when the bills went off the House floor, there was, believe it or not, even more garbage in them. Especially the state government finance bill. So you had the garbage from the House, the garbage from the Senate, and then all the policy that added on to the finance and the big, what they called the Omnibus Prime bill. And that's what we got at about, I'm trying to think what time of night it was. It all kind of blends together.
About 7:30, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's when it was posted publicly. The Senate started debating it at 9:30, and I believe we did not start debating it until 11 p.m. that night, the last night of session.
You and I have talked in the past about this policy of Kurt Dowd's and Joyce Pepin's to basically build a bill in private, which really does not. Most of the bill does not see the light of day. It's stuff that's written in by these Republicans. Dirty tricks. We saw that in the ag bill. There was an attempt to basically saying, if you don't sign this bill, then nitrate levels, plans to basically bring down nitrate levels in the groundwater will go away. Stuff like that, which is truly obnoxious. But that's their whole point. They want this to come at the last second. They're doing the very least they possibly can do to show it to the people, and then get it passed, and then act like they've done something good.
Well, and I am all for transparency. I'm a big believer in the process, and the more the process is transparent, the more voices that are heard, the better policy you have. I think it's good when a bill goes through more than one committee, and that is one of the things I've been pushing for, as well as some of my DFL colleagues, is even to do something as little as saying that a bill has to be publicly posted 24 hours ahead of the time you have to vote on it. Mm-hmm. I'm a quick reader, but 3 hours to read 998 pages, 5 of which was just the title page, just isn't going to happen. And even if you followed the bills through the process, it's still hard. That last night, the night before we voted on it, when they put that, we're putting the Omnibus Prime bill together in committee, I was seeing tweets from folks that were in the room trying to watch committee that were unable to follow because there were so many amendments being put in that didn't even have copies for the people in the room, let alone anything posted for the public to see. And that was 11:30 at night.
It is so disgusting what they think is representing the people. It really is, because it's what they do is not representing the people. It's representing special interests. As a matter of fact, it's a textbook example of not caring for your constituents, only caring for the people telling you what to do.
And it doesn't have to be that way. I worked before I became a House member while I was on the city council. My day job was working for Senator Latz. And I remember when we had the Democrats in charge of the House and the Senate and Governor Pawlenty, and the Democrats in the House and the Senate put together 3 different rounds of omnibus bills that they sent to Governor Pawlenty. The first and second round were vetoed. The third round, they came to a compromise. But that takes time in planning. And what we saw this year was a colossal mismanagement of time and the session by the Republican leadership.
There were 1 or 2 points which were good. I mean, there and I often have said it. I've sort of said it. It was things that if the Republicans had gone against them, they would have looked so bad that they basically had no choice but to go along with it. So there were some positive things that did happen in this session.
Yes, there were actually the pensions bill. This is a bill that had been worked on for almost 3 years. And it had Republican chief authors on both sides, Representative O'Driscoll and I believe Senator Rosen. But this bill had been put together, and they finally got all the stakeholders at the table. And this is the bill that funds the pensions for our teachers, the people that guard our prisons, the folks that plow our roads and work at our state agencies, and our police and fire. So there's a lot of stakeholders and a lot of livelihood connected to this bill because these were promises that were made by the state. And even though we had bipartisan support and it sailed through the Senate during the first month of session, the House Republican leadership held it up until the last 15 minutes of session and clearly said they were holding it hostage to make sure we were behaving. Now, to do something like that affects so many Minnesotans. Kind of disgusting.
Who said that this was something they said out publicly?
Speaker Kurt Doubt had made that. I'd seen it. I'd heard it on a news clip, and it was very brief. But he said, we just want to make sure that people behave and we can get our work done.
So the Speaker of the Minnesota House put the pensions of millions, probably, or at least close to a million of Minnesota's
thousands, thousands and thousands.
Thousands and thousands. Okay, so thousands and thousands of Minnesotans. Their pensions are on the line, and Kurt Doubt is basically saying, "Hey, if you get out of line, if you do something I don't like, I'm not going to fund their pensions."
Yes, it got to the Senate with 8 minutes to spare.
What a disgusting troll. And that's me saying this, Representative. I know you're not.
I should say it got back to the Senate because they had done an amendment in the House. So even though the Senate had passed it earlier, they had to pass it again.
Seriously, what kind of Bond villain does this sort of thing where they hold people's retirements and if you get out of line, there goes that teacher or that prison guard's retirement? I mean, what kind of horrible human being thinks that's effective leadership?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, the positive thing is that it did get passed and that it was a really balanced package. It was a way to put our pensions on economic stability for the future so we don't end up like states like Illinois who are having huge problems with it. And like I said, it's about promises made. So that was a high point, was to get the pensions bill passed. And that we actually, at the very last minute, the last 15 minutes of 30 minutes of session, we got a bonding bill through. There's a whole host of problems with some of the funding in the bonding bill when it comes to the LCCMR that may be completely unconstitutional. So we'll have to see what the governor does with that.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like he's going to do anything this weekend with it, but there's a lot of Democrats asking for a line item veto on some of that stuff. How many? By the way, with the pension bill, how many workers total did that affect?
Oh, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there's a lot of great projects in there for higher education, asset preservation, some regional projects. Personally, I was really disappointed. A project I'd worked on since I got in the House for 4 years, Perspectives, Inc., which is a St. Louis Park organization that works with women straight out of homeless shelter that have addiction issues and children, and it houses them up to 2 years and gives them job training and therapy and takes care of the kids after school. We could not get their money in, despite the fact I had really good bipartisan support. In fact, I had given it over to a Republican author to carry in the House, and Senator Latz carried it in the Senate. But it didn't make the cut because they decided not to put very much cash in the bonding bill.
Well,
the cash went to tax cuts instead
and that's the point that
for
should be made.
corporations.
Yeah, and the Republicans have been doing that for 30 years now. They get money and they give it to corporations. We had a budget surplus. We could have funded a lot more things, and the Republicans, because they still are eyeing to give corporations more tax cuts as opposed to help the citizens of Minnesota, stuff like projects like yours were put to the wayside because it wasn't deemed to be important enough. It sure is not for Republicans. It's not as important as a tax cut to a billionaire.
Well, and that's the thing too. I think the theme of this session is missed opportunities. The missed opportunities when it came to trying to figure out a way to really fund the opioid crisis that we're having in Minnesota, trying to find real measures to help prevent the elder abuse and sensible gun violence solutions, as well as doing something about the distracted driving and the folks dying on our roads. That was another really big disappointment, is the hands-free bill. I saw that bill in committee last year, had a ton of support, had bipartisan support, got hung up on, went through all the committees over 2 years, had a Republican author, and then Representative Frank Hornstein was the second DFL House author. Representative Youakim was carrying the bill. And it got all the way to the General Register and got hung up. And Representative Frank Hornstein kept being told, "Don't worry, we're going to hear it. I've been told we're going to hear it." Representative Youakim kept saying, "Just wait." There were different vehicles we could have amended it to, but Representative Hornstein wanted to respect the process. And finally, 4 days before the end of session, we finally got fed up, and the DFL House members did a sense of urgency, declared a sense of urgency to bring it to the floor. Now, you need a majority of people to vote to say, yes, we agree it's important, we should vote on it today. It's already on general orders, so it wasn't stuck in a committee. It had gone through all the committees. We knew from the Republican author that there were over 50 members on the Republican side that were supportive, and the majority of our members on the Democratic side were, so plenty of votes to pass it. When we declared the sense of urgency and took a vote on that, every single Republican voted against it, including the author who stood up and said, "Today is not the day."
You see,
with 4 days left in session.
That is the insanity, because he wasn't the only Republican that was out there saying, "I'm going to do this bill." Every single one of them said nope, and they clearly had no intention. The fact that it never came back up again, they had no intention of bringing that bill back in. They clearly, I think there was a lot of lobbying going on behind the scenes on that. I got to tell you the truth, Representative. I'm so floored by this the pension thing about doubt, because I hadn't heard that doubt was basically dangling.
And I will have to try to find you that clip that I saw, so I can make sure you get it, because I don't want to speak out of school if I was reading something on Twitter that wasn't substantiated. But it was very clear that even if it wasn't said publicly, there is absolutely zero reason to wait until the last 15 minutes of session to bring that bill up.
Everything on Twitter is legit, so just don't worry about it.
Oh, yeah, we all know that.
Oh, yeah, 100%. You have refiled. You are running once again for your House seat, correct?
Yes, I am.
It would be sure nice to see you in the majority this time.
I think a lot of things aren't going to change unless we have some change up at who is in leadership, because as you've seen, and I do a weekly review every week. I send out via email, and a few weeks ago I explained how important it is to have the majority by using our general registry as an example. These are bills that have made it all the way through the process and are sitting there just waiting for a vote on the House floor. And the last 2 weeks of session, there were 131 bills on the general registry awaiting action. Only 11 of them were from Democrats.
Wow. It's abuse of power, basically. That's all it is.
So, it's very interesting. It really does. Elections do matter, not just in your election, but elections across the state, because when whoever is in charge gets to decide where bills go in committee, whether, who has the gavels, who has the hearings, even when a bill gets to the House calendar, whether or not it's going to be heard, all is determined by who's in the majority.
Well, and if the mute button gets used up on the speaker's chair, and we talked about that one with Melissa Hortman as well. It is so important. You basically, you've got a town hall coming up here in your district with Senator Latch. We talked to him yesterday. Peggy Flanagan, the representative, who's well is running with Tim Walz. You guys are all going to get together in St. Louis Park coming up here in a few days, correct?
Yes, on June 5th at St. Louis Park City Hall at 6 o'clock. And Senator Latz and Representative Flanagan and I will just give a quick, brief overview. But what we really want to do is have questions from people in the audience to see where they're at and answer any questions they may have, because that's part of democracy, too.
What is your website if people want to find out more about your campaign for 46B?
It is CherylYouakim.com. So that's CHERYL. YOUAKIM as in Mary.com.
CherylYouakim.com. And I want to encourage people out there. We need to take the House back. We have a chance at taking the Senate now with Fischbach resigning her Senate seat. There's a 33-33 split there. So the Senate is up for grabs as well. This election, everything is on the table, and we need to have the Democrats in charge if we're going to have anything get done in the next years. That's not done at the last second in these massive bills that is just thrown out there that's just full of Republican pork, dictated by someone who's not even in the state. So help out Cheryl and help out all Democrats, because we need to take that House back. How many seats do we need for the House to flip?
12.
12. That's attainable. That's very attainable. You know, it's great. You know, you are in such a great Democratic district. You're in my district, so you know.
I'm still going to be out door knocking as of June 3rd and hitting all those doors and hitting all those apartments. You never ever take anything for granted.
You never do, and I love that. And I'll have my Youakim sign out in my front yard. You can see that as well. But I will say that it is just such a pleasure to work with you on this. It's such strong Democratic leadership just for me, and I'm so proud to have you as my representative. We need to have Cheryl and the rest of the Democrats in charge. The 12 seats, this is not something that's out of reach. There are 12 seats within the metro area we could probably flip, and we would have the Democrats in charge. Plus, I got to tell you, Cheryl, I have talked to some of these outstate Democrats. They are fired up, and they're going to the mattresses. They are absolutely looking for the fight here. They're trying to take some of these outstate seats that the Republicans have held for a while, and they want them in the Democratic corner.
Yes, I think they are, and I think all of us have a driving urge to make sure that Minnesota works for everyone and not just a few.
CherylYouakim.com. I'll post the links to this all later on, and we'll spotlight this interview as well. Representative, thank you very much. I appreciate the time, and thanks for being my representative.
Well, thank you, Matt, and I look forward to talking to you at the door again, if not before.
You bet. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Cheryl Youakim is Democrat of the Day, 46B. We'll take a break, wrap up the show. If you want to talk about either that interview or Chris Cluey, time to call 952-946-6205.